Welcome back to English 11 Days. Today, we're diving into the 2011 film The Intouchables, a blend of biography, comedy, and drama. Spoiler alert, proceed with caution. One late night in Paris, Driss is speeding through the city with his employer, Philippe, as his passenger. When the traffic gets dull, Driss decides to push the limits, weaving through cars and ignoring traffic signs. This attracts the attention of the police, and Driss wagers €100 that he can lose them. However, after a high-speed chase and a narrow escape under a bridge, the cops trap them on both sides. Undeterred, Driss raises the bet to €200, claiming he can get them an escort. Feigning distress and claiming Philippe needs urgent medical attention, Driss convinces the officers, who find the wheelchair in the car and see Philippe convulsing, which is also an act. Believing it's an emergency, the police escort them to the hospital. Driss celebrates his victory by playing September by Earth, Wind, and Fire, and once they arrive, he shares a smoke with Philippe after the cops leave. Driss takes charge, driving them away before the hospital staff can find them. This is where their friendship starts. Philippe and his assistant, Magali, are struggling to find a new caregiver through interviews, which are yielding only standard or awkward responses. They're surprised when Driss barges in before his turn, seeking only to get some papers signed so he can claim unemployment benefits. Though he's blunt and even flirts with Magali, Philippe finds him entertaining and asks him to return the next day for the paperwork. Driss returns to his modest neighborhood, where he tries to bathe while his younger siblings distract him, finally managing to clean up with help from his more responsible sister, Mina. While waiting for their mother, he sees his brother Adama leaving a suspicious car. When Adama returns home, he makes a vague excuse about being at school and leaves again with his bag, which raises Driss's suspicions. Later, when their mother arrives, Driss gifts her a stolen Fabergé egg and lies about being on vacation. His mother is displeased, as he had vanished for 6 months without a word, and now he appears as if her home were a hotel. Fed up with his lies and overwhelmed by her other responsibilities, Driss's mother kicks him out, instructing him not to return. Driss spends the night unwinding with some snacks and neighborhood friends. The following day, he returns to Philippe's house to pick up his paperwork and is greeted by the housekeeper, Yvonne. She gives him a tour, explaining Philippe's daily routine and showing him his new room, complete with a private bathroom. Driss is immediately taken with the luxurious bathtub, but is soon introduced to Philippe, who not only hands him the signed papers but also offers him a job. Driss accepts a 1-month trial, and Philippe bets that he won't last more than 2 weeks. After settling into his new room, Driss begins learning how to care for Philippe, including tasks like stimulating Philippe's legs, transferring him to his wheelchair, assisting with showers, and changing clothes. Things become awkward when Driss learns he must also help with putting on compression stockings and cleaning Philippe after bathroom use. Despite his initial reluctance and complaints, Driss reluctantly accepts these responsibilities as part of his job. Later, while enjoying a snack on the roof, Driss is interrupted by Philippe's daughter, Eliza, and her boyfriend, Bastien, who are looking for a private place. He kicks them out after refusing to share his beer. Driss quickly adjusts to his new routine, though he makes some early mistakes, such as handing Philippe the phone instead of placing it on his ear, or forgetting the baby monitor during bath time. He also learns to organize Philippe's mail, opening most letters but keeping private ones in a separate folder. When he finds a flyer for female escorts, he starts a separate file for them rather than discarding them, as Philippe suggests. Despite his new responsibilities, Driss continues to enjoy himself. He persistently tries to flirt with Magali, albeit unsuccessfully, and occasionally invites escorts to his room. One morning, after Yvonne reprimands him for being late and discovers dangerous weapons in his bag, she says nothing about them. That day, Driss's task is to drive Philippe around. He refuses to use the van, preferring one of the rarely used fancy cars. Although Philippe initially doubts the practicality of this choice, he soon becomes excited about the idea of a more thrilling ride, despite Yvonne's disapproval. When they try to leave, a neighbor is blocking their way, ignoring the no parking sign. Driss promptly confronts the neighbor, grabs him by the shirt, and threatens him until he moves the car. Philippe is impressed by Driss's actions, but Yvonne, once again, disapproves. They visit a museum where Philippe plans to purchase a piece of artwork that Driss dismisses as not worth the money, describing it as just a red blotch on the canvas. Later, Philippe meets with a relative who expresses concern about Driss's potential for violence and reveals his criminal record. However, Philippe is unfazed. He values Driss for his lack of pity and his ability to joke around. After another unsuccessful attempt to flirt with Magali, Driss has dinner with Yvonne in the kitchen while Philippe dictates a letter to Magali. Yvonne turns off the baby monitor, claiming it's a private conversation, and explains that Philippe is pen pals with a woman named Eleanor. Those are the letters Driss wasn't allowed to open. Despite their correspondence, Philippe has never met Eleanor in person. Their relationship is purely epistolary. Driss teases Yvonne about the gardener's frequent glances before heading to bed. He's trying to sleep when he hears strange noises from the baby monitor. Philippe is struggling to breathe. Unable to ignore it, Driss goes to Philippe's room and comforts him through the attack with soothing words and a wet cloth to wipe his face. Philippe eventually falls asleep, only to wake moments later, needing fresh air. Driss promptly puts Philippe in his wheelchair, covers him with blankets, and takes him for a stroll by the river. This is the first time Philippe has seen Paris at night in a long while. Feeling more relaxed, he explains to Driss that while medicine helps, he sometimes experiences phantom pain. Philippe also admits that, due to his condition, he can't pleasure a woman but finds satisfaction in having his sensitive ears massaged. When the phantom pain threatens to return, Driss offers Philippe one of his joints. Though initially skeptical, Philippe ends up enjoying it. Afterward, they dine at a restaurant, joking and sharing a meal. Philippe then decides to share more of his personal history. He met his wife during their student years, and shortly after their marriage, she suffered 5 miscarriages and was diagnosed with an incurable illness. They adopted Elisa during this time. Philippe has always loved competitions, extreme sports, and speed. He found this thrill through paragliding. It was a paragliding session during which bad weather caused him to crash and break his vertebrae that led to his condition. He believes his real handicap isn't the wheelchair, but living without his wife. After more joking around, Philippe realizes that Driss has completed his 1-month trial and is now officially hired. However, Philippe needs to return the Fabergé egg Driss stole, as it was a gift from his wife, one he received every year, totaling 25, matching their years together. The next day, Driss meets Mina as she's leaving school. She's a bit offended because he hasn't been responding to her messages except to ask her to look for the egg. She also mentions that some police officers have been calling their home. Afterwards, Driss visits Adama, who admits he was caught with 30 grams of drugs. Driss wants to take him out for lunch, but Adama refuses and instead gets into the same suspicious car from before. Later, Driss is present while Philippe dictates a letter to Eleanor through Magali. Driss finds the letter's flowery language boring and thinks Philippe should be more straightforward. He's also surprised that they've been writing to each other for 6 months without exchanging any photos. When Driss finds Eleanor's phone number in one of the letters, he decides to call her, forcing Philippe to speak with her directly. Their conversation goes well, and Philippe ends up talking to her frequently, even right before he and Driss go to the opera, where Driss laughs and mocks the costumes. The next day, Driss convinces Philippe to agree to exchange photos with Eleanor, choosing one of Philippe in his wheelchair. Later, while he's painting, Elisa bursts into his room asking for cigarettes and mocks his artistic attempts. Angered, Driss kicks her out before going to see Philippe, who is currently asking Yvonne to replace the chosen photo with one from when he wasn't quadriplegic. Yvonne hides the photo in the escort file just before Driss arrives, complaining about Elisa and telling Philippe he needs to discipline her, which Yvonne agrees with. Philippe agrees to talk to Elisa, but is surprised when Driss reveals he's been painting. As the days go by, Philippe and Driss's friendship continues to grow. Driss takes Philippe to play in the snow and brings him along on his runs. Philippe buys Driss his first suit and scolds his daughter while Driss listens through the baby monitor. When Driss finishes his first painting, he shows it to Magali, who slaps him when he tries to kiss her. However, Philippe likes the painting and promises to try to sell it. They enjoy their time together, including getting a faster car, sharing joints, and hiring escorts. When Philippe's birthday arrives, he's not very enthusiastic. He pretends to be surprised by the party and meets relatives who only visit to check if he's still alive. Philippe finds the celebration rather dull. While he and the guests enjoy live classical music, Driss searches for Elisa, who is crying in her room after taking some of Yvonne's pills, which didn't have the intended effect. Elisa is upset because Bastien broke up with her and called her a tart. She asks Driss to talk to Bastien, which he agrees to do for a price. Meanwhile, Philippe shows Driss's painting to a relative and convinces him to buy it for 11,000 euros. Driss returns to the dining room and chats with Yvonne, who informs him that Magali is in a relationship with someone named Fred, but that their relationship is rocky, giving Driss some hope. As the party winds down, Philippe makes Driss listen to some important classical music pieces, but Driss only responds with jokes. After the band finishes, he plays Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind & Fire on his iPod and starts dancing in the middle of the floor, impressing the party guests and making Philippe smile. Later, while putting Philippe to bed, Driss opens Eleanor's latest letter. She has sent her picture showing that she's quite pretty and suggests meeting next week when she visits Paris. On the day of the date, Yvonne and Driss prepare Philippe with various outfits until they find the perfect one. Since Yvonne will take Philippe to the date, Driss uses his day off to visit Bastien, threatening him until Bastien agrees to apologize to Elisa, bring her croissants every day, and fix his hair. Afterward, Driss visits his mother at work, but only watches her from a distance. At the restaurant, Yvonne and Philippe wait for Eleanor, who is very late. After an hour, Philippe decides to leave and calls Driss to pick him up, not noticing that Eleanor arrives at the same time. That night, Philippe takes Driss on his private plane and gives him the money from selling the painting, making Driss immensely happy. They arrive in the countryside the next morning, and Philippe decides to go paragliding, taking Driss along. Although Driss is initially scared, he ends up enjoying the experience. When they return home, Adama is waiting for Driss and gets scolded when Driss sees the scars on his face. Adama still won't tell Driss what's happening in his life, so Driss makes him wait in his room while he calls Mina to reassure her and then puts Philippe to bed. Philippe, however, isn't sleepy yet. After showing Driss a painting, Philippe asks about Driss's family. At first reluctant, Driss eventually reveals that Adama isn't his real brother and that his parents are actually his aunt and uncle. They brought him from Senegal when he was 8 because they couldn't have children. His real name is Bakari Bassari, but since other children had that name, they called him Idris, which became Driss. His aunt later miraculously conceived, and after his uncle died, there were other men and more children. Just as Driss had discussed Elisa with Philippe, Philippe points out that Adama needs discipline and decides to fire Driss so he can be with his family, stating that he can't spend his whole life taking care of an old man. The next morning, after Bastien delivers his daily croissant with a better hairstyle, Driss packs his bags and prepares to leave. Magali comes to say her goodbyes, and when Driss makes one last attempt to flirt with her, Magali introduces him to her partner, Fred, short for Frédéric. It turns out Magali isn't interested in men, and Driss quickly gives up. As he leaves the house, he returns the baby monitor to Yvonne and teases her for having misled him about Magali just to mess with him. In response, Yvonne gives him the escort file he had started, and Driss is disappointed to find that the picture he had chosen is hidden there. He throws away the file but keeps the photo for himself. Outside, Driss encounters a car blocking the entrance once again and asks the driver to move it, even though he no longer works there. When Adama confronts him about it, Driss insists it's a matter of principle. A few hours later, the two brothers go to pick up their mother at the station. Back at the house, Philippe is having his first dinner with his new caretaker, who is stuffy and boring. Philippe decides to send him away without even eating, and with Yvonne out on a date with the gardener, no one is there to reprimand him. As time passes, Driss returns to his old life. He reconnects with his old friends and tells the people from the suspicious car to stop bothering Adama. During an interview for a job he's underqualified for, he impresses the employer by describing himself as pragmatic and applying the art knowledge he gained from working with Philippe. This earns him a job as a driver. Philippe continues to be dissatisfied with his new caretaker and remains in a constant bad mood. One night, when he refuses any help with his phantom pain, Yvonne calls Driss, asking him to come over. They find themselves back in the same situation as before, with the police initially chasing them and later escorting them to the hospital. After this adventure, Driss drives Philippe to the coast, where the sight of the sea helps Philippe relax. Later, Driss trims Philippe's overgrown beard before taking him to a restaurant for lunch. But he doesn't stay because someone else will be keeping Philippe company. Driss wishes Philippe luck and returns his egg before leaving. Philippe then discovers that his date is Eleanor, who is delighted to see him and isn't bothered by the wheelchair at all. The real Count Philippe Pozzo di Borgo now lives in Morocco, has remarried, and has 2 daughters. The real Driss, whose actual name is Abdel Yasmin Selou, runs his own firm and is married with 3 children. The 2 men remain very close friends to this day.